I welcome you to the Vetiva Breakfast Meeting brought to you by Vetiva Capital Management in partnership with Frontier Africa Report. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and may be shared with third parties, as well as being broadcast live on Facebook. Also, before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that tomorrow we'll be having a guest speaker, Adebola Olatubosun, a senior analyst, investor relations at Adova PLC, who will be speaking with us on the implications of a subsidy regime on the downstream sector. The presentation is scheduled to hold for 30 minutes, inclusive of Q&A. Today, we'll be hearing from our equity and fixed income traders, as well as from our partner from Frontier Africa Reports, after which we'll take questions if we have time. First, I'd like to go to Sheon, our equity trader, to give us a breakdown of the West African market and yesterday's trading in the NSE. Good morning, Sheon.
Yeah, good morning, Joshua, and good morning, everyone. It was all green for the market we track in West Africa, as the BRVM, the Ghana Stock Exchange, and the Nigerian Stock Exchange all started the week on a positive. For the BRVM, the composite index there sustained positive close, as seen in the previous session, closing 2 basis points up to start the week in the green. This marginal gain moderates the year-to-date loss to negative 2.52%. Though the market breadth was negative with 8 gainers and 6 losers in that market. Moving quickly to Ghana, the GSE also sustained the positive run, closing 89 basis points higher to further improve the year-to-date positive close to positive 14.06%, as MTN Ghana, like we've seen in previous sessions, continue to provide positive support for that market. Then coming up to Nigeria, the NSE share index started the new week on a positive note as well, closing 89 basis points higher, just like we saw in Ghana, this is thanks to gain across all sectors, save for the banks that lost marginally with just 1 bips downward close. Specifically, gains in Bois Cement, which was a 500 basis point close higher, which reversed previous session's loss. We remember the particular stock lost on Friday, but that loss was reversed in yesterday's trading. We also saw Adova closing up 370 basis points. Stanbic, Julius Berger, and Access all accounted for this positive close, as we saw all those counters closing positive. Like I mentioned earlier, all sectors closed positive aside the banking sector, with the highest gain recorded in the industrial goods sector, having closed 212 basis points, as Bois Cement and Julius Berger supported the significant upward close. Negative daily return in UBA and First Bank held back the banking sector from closing in the green, though the negative close was just a marginal 1 basis point loss. Generally, investors continue to trade cautiously, as seen in the market activity, which declined compared to previous session. The market turnover declined about 25%, as the banks sustained their dominance in the market activity, with over 65% of the turnover done in that of the total turnover in the market done in that sector. Then Zenith and GT were the majorly traded names on the day. Market breadth, just looking at the sentiment, market breadth improved to 2.78 times, as we saw 25 advancers in the session, as against 8 decliners. Moving into today, We expect cautious trading activity to persist as market awaits decision of the MPC, though we have said we do not see any policy shift yet at this meeting. We'll likely see sustained activity in the banking names going into today as well, as dividend investment continues for a few names, especially in Zenith, and we're also likely to see a few investors cherry pick some of the other names in that sector. However, we do not rule out profit taking in some of the names that have appreciated albeit marginally in recent sessions. So we'll continue to advise investors to look at fundamentally sound stocks at this point as the macro headwind of the country still persists. That'll be it for the equities market. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Next, we'll be hearing from our fixed income trader, Omar again, on the fixed income market. Good morning, Omar again.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So I'll start with the money market. Yesterday, we saw significant decline in the system liquidity. System opened 92.82 billion positive, coming from the 468 billion positive it opened on Friday. So despite the low liquidity figures recorded on Monday, we saw money market rate decline to trade around 30% levels, coming from the between 20% to 30% recorded on Friday. And this was largely due to lack of any major funding need. So our expectation for today is that the money market will trade at lower levels on the back of improved system liquidity. Moving on to the FS market, despite the Nigerian External Reserve recording its first growth in about 36 days, the Naira depreciated across all windows. The External Reserve grew by 0.11% to close at $34.46 billion. The parallel market lost 1 Naira to trade at 486 Naira to a dollar, while the I&E window traded at a high of 412 Naira to a dollar, closing at 410.13 Naira to a dollar. We also saw significant decline in I&E industry turnover yesterday. I&E industry turnover yesterday was about $25.88 million, coming from $46.42 million where it closed on Friday. Our expectation is that Naira will continue to trade around these levels, barring any significant inflow of FS into the system. Moving on to the Treasury Bus Market, as expected, the Treasury Bus Market kicked off this week on a very quiet note as attention shifted to the MPC meeting. As trading progressed, we saw a lot of interest on the CBN special bill. Offers on that end was around 5.8 levels to 5.9. We issued 1 year bill at about 6 at those levels. Hence, few trades were action seen on the almost space. The offers on that end are. Our expectation for today is that there will also be another quiet session as players continue to wait on the outcome of the MPC meeting. I'll conclude with the bonds market. Just like the T-bills market, the bonds market also resumed this week on a very quiet note. However, we saw activity pick up later in the day. The maturities that enjoyed the most action are the 2023, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, and 2029. The interest in on that end was largely buy-side interest. Few trades were consummated on these maturities. Our expectation for today is that the bonds market will also trade on a very quiet note as players shift their attention to the bonds auction happening tomorrow for guidance on interest rates direction. That will be all for fixed income. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omar again. Next, we'll be hearing from Sheikh Mbu, our partner, who will be talking to us on the BRVM stock exchange. Good morning, Sheikh.
Hello, good morning. Thanks for having me. So this week in the BRVM was a record week for the year 2021 because most of the indexes ended up on the green side, mainly led by the BRVM agriculture and the public services. Only the logistic industry was on the red with a weekly decrease of 1.31%. Overall, in the stock market, the highest increase was allocated to the Société Africaine of Plantation de Verre, which is the rubber leading company in Ivory Coast. Its share price is on an upward trend, driven mainly by dynamic purchases of 4,226 shares traded this week, compared to 1,776 last week. The share price experienced a 36% gain, led mainly by the high international rubber price, which jumped by over 61% since the third quarter of 2020. The investors were very interested by the share price of by the stock price of the company, and despite the technical analysis, they still held onto this onto this stock. The company performed very well in 2020, and that increase in the share price in the commodity market of the rubber basically gives good perspective on the company. The second one is SMB Ivory Coast, which share price jumped by over 17%. That was one of the very dynamic in the market, the bitumen company. In terms of the sharpest drop, we have the Sikablu company, which investors sold their shares because they expected a significant capital gain after the publication of the 2020 company. These were mostly their legacy investors who tried to capitalize on the performance of the stock since last year, and they decided to sell in the market because the company, after the publication of their 2020 results on March 12, they displayed an 82.9% increase in net income. This was mainly driven by the acceleration of energy infrastructure in Ivory Coast, just like was said in the last few weeks. So the strong demand for aluminium cable and continuation of energy for everyone project in Ivory Coast may be driving again and gives a good perspective on the SICAB stock price in the future. Also, there was a notice that was issued for an ordinary shareholder meeting for mainly three companies, Bank of Africa Niger, Bank of Africa Senegal, and EcoBank Ivory Coast, mostly around April. And they are expecting all to distribute a gross dividend of 6 billion for BEOA Niger, which means 6 billion CFA, which means a net dividend per share of 429 CFA, which will be paid on May 6. For BEOA Senegal, it is a gross dividend of 4.29 billion, meaning a net dividend per share of 161 CFA on June 1st. And EcoBank Côte d'Ivoire, 21 billion CFA, meaning a net dividend share of 343 CFA payable on April 30th. In the bond market, the market closed with a market cap of around 6.4 billion. The market is pretty stable since the last few weeks. And the weekly value traded stood at 2.7 billion, mainly marked by transaction of the Mali Treasury bond, offering a maturity up to 2027 at the rate of 6.5%, for an amount of 1 billion, and the beginning of this week, the Senegal Sukuk with a rate of 6% maturity 2026 for an amount of 700 million CFA. In the money market, over the period over the last week, issuers requested in the West African Monetary Union a total amount of 85 billion, but the market only retained 66 billion despite the 143 billion that was offered by the market. Therefore, just a coverage of 45.95%. The issue of the 84-month Togo Treasury bond on March 19 was the most popular transaction with a coverage rate of 268%, and was and over 53.71% was offered by the market. And in this week, we are expecting Burkina Faso Treasury bills with a maturity of 12 months for a total amount of 30 billion CFA. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Sheikh. Next, we'll be hearing from our partners at Frontier Africa Report, Temple Asaju. Good morning, Temple.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. From East Africa, Kenya's diaspora remittances were up by 19% in February to $260.2 million. And that's 19% higher than the 219 million recorded in the month of January. That's a record from the Central Bank of Kenya. Brigham Insurance is looking now to sell its stake in mortgage financier HF Group to a big bank. They intend to sell 48.2% of the stake to one of the country's biggest banks, but the bank is not yet named. The plan is to review their investment portfolio and to help them focus more on the insurance businesses squarely. Then you have, we've been talking about the BOC gases sale in recent time. BOC Gas is an extension of the company listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. The version listed on the Nairobi Stock Exchange rather is scheduled for sale to Kabaseed Investments and one other investment company there. But that has now been put on hold. Court actually put the takeover on hold because there's been an appeal of a major case by one of the key shareholders there. So the case is now before the appellate court. And so every other key element of the transaction has now been placed on hold. Continue to watch what will happen afterwards. And in Somali, Somtel has launched an IPO and it sets the issue price at $100 per share. Now, that is something that we understand has been enjoying some major patronage from the market and has been encouraging to the issuers. In the Ethiopian market, you have Ethiopian fintech startup ArifPay raising some $3.5 million funding. That has been quite successful so far. And we understand that they are to operate and manage mobile point of sale transaction equipments in that country. The platform is expected to launch very soon, any moment from now. Analysts expect that the license that has just been given by the National Bank of Ethiopia is something that will rev up their performance. And in western part of Africa, we are looking at so Ghana had its MPC meeting. They held rate at 14.5% on inflation risks. We know that that is the sixth consecutive time that is holding. Mali is looking to pay 6.5% interest on the 2020 to 2028 bond loan. Settlement date is March 27th. Then in western part of Africa, South Africa has now concluded the sale of its AstraZeneca vaccines, which it purchased from the African Union but did not use. They had recall that they tested the AstraZeneca vaccine on some of their indigenes, and they realized that it just didn't work for the variants of COVID-19 that they have in that country. Zimbabwe and Rwanda signed 5 cooperative agreements. This is coming ahead of their investments and trade conference, and the plan is to explore opportunities to further to advance their economic cooperation and unpack some available trade and investment opportunities. In Malawi, they begin the probe of foreign businesses without license in that country. And then in the northern part of Africa, you've got a Cairo-based Afrexim Bank announcing December 8th to 14th of this year as the date for their trade fair, something that they hold regularly. So watch out for that as well for year end. And then the UK investment company, Axis, which we all know had some interest in Nigeria some years ago, they invested in StarTimes back in, not StarTimes, I'm sorry, one of the CDMA telecoms companies. This same Axis has now they've made inroads into Egypt now. So far, they've pumped in $1 billion in Egypt. They had indicated their interests to invest over $4 billion in Egypt sometimes last year. Now they've done some $1 billion. They had also planned an international fund, Axis 5, which they intend to gather some investors from, and that has been quite positive as well for them. So their interest is in renewable energy and infrastructure projects in that country. Finally is Malawi Stock Exchange, where listed companies' profits declined drastically by an average of 21.8%, around 15 billion dirhams in 2020. Looks like the COVID-19 really battered their books in that stock exchange, the books of the companies listed in that stock exchange. These are our stories for today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Sample. We've now reached the Q&A segment. If you have any questions you would like to ask, you can raise your hand if you prefer to speak, or you can leave the question in the chat box or the Q&A box, or if you are joining us from Facebook, you can drop a comment and we will address your question. It appears we have no questions today, which means we've reached the end of the meeting. Before we go, I would like to remind everyone that tomorrow we'll be having our guest speaker, Adebola Olatubosun, Senior Analyst, Investor Relations at Adova PLC, who will be speaking to us of the implications of the subsidy regime on the downstream sector in Nigeria. We do hope that you will join us for what is still to be an exciting segment. Thank you for joining us today. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. We urge you to continue to stay safe. Have a good morning. Goodbye.